Hello, my name is Stephen Lugo, and this is my final project presentation called Sticking It to Diabetes. I'm going to be talking about a new insulin patch that was created in collaboration with UNC, UCLA, MIT, and the CDC. All right, first and foremost, what is diabetes? There's two types of diabetes. Type 1 is known as insulin dependent diabetes. This is usually someone is born with this, and it's the pancreas just not producing any insulin or really enough insulin. You have type 2 diabetes, which is known as insulin resistant diabetes, and this is something that's usually developed throughout someone's life. Um, Diabetes can also be defined by a body's inability to produce insulin or not produce enough insulin. This is necessary to metabolize sugar, also known as glucose. Insulin is a hormone that is sort of like a dinner bell for our cells. It tells the cells to metabolize or eat sugar. Without insulin acting as this dinner bell, our cells are not able to eat any sugar and not get the nutrients they need and really just kind of starve. This can have critical consequences such as organ damage, coma, and death. As of 2022, approximately 37.3 million Americans are diabetic. 31% of these diabetics are insulin dependent. Um, the CDC expects this number to rise drastically in the coming years. Diabetes is so incredibly common that I would be surprised if you personally didn't know someone who's either type 1 or type 2 diabetic. Now that we've talked about what diabetes is and the prevalence in our society, let's talk about some of the treatments that are current for these individuals. You have electric insulin pumps that kind of continuously inject insulin while monitoring your blood sugar levels. You also have finger stick blood glucose meters that you have to kind of poke your finger, draw some blood, and put that into the machine. You have subcutaneous insulin injections, usually put in the belly, and ingestible insulin. A lot of these have drawbacks from medication errors from the user, exposing these areas to infections, and insulin pumps being kind of known to malfunction and overdose the user on insulin. Researchers have created a possible alternative method for diabetes treatment called the GRMN, a glucose regulating microneedle patch. This is a patch that is placed on the skin with microneedles going into the tissue that react to blood glucose levels. It can be thought of as a negative feedback loop. As blood glucose levels increase, this creates a chemical reaction in the microneedles that causes a volume increase, which in turn releases the insulin stored inside them. As the insulin is released, blood glucose decreases, which decreases the microneedle's affinity to release the insulin. This is why it's thought of as a negative feedback loop. There are three factors that affect the secretion of insulin from the patch. We've already talked about the blood glucose and how it regulates based on that. A second factor is from the ratio of the two chemicals that create the microneedles, DMAEA and 3A PBA. The greater the ratio difference between these chemicals, the greater the insulin release. The last factor is the patch size. The greater the size, the greater the insulin released. These factors allow providers to titrate and tailor the patches to a specific patient's weight and insulin resistance. All of this brings us to the research. Experiments were conducted on STZ induced diabetic mice. Looking at the first graph, graph D, you can see three lines. The red one correlates to a control group. The blue is the experimental group with the GRMN patch, and the black line represents healthy, non diabetic mice. Our y axis represents the plasma glucose level, and the x axis is time. These mice were injected with a high glucose solution, causing a spike in their PGL. Looking at the blue line, you can see that the GRMN not only reacted by secreting enough insulin to combat this hypoglycemic state, but also titrated and waned the insulin off as to not induce hypoglycemia. In conclusion, This patch provides diabetic individuals with increased independence from medical devices such as insulin pumps, hypodermic needles, and painful blood glucose finger sticks. It also decreases the occurrence of missed or miscalculated doses by taking user error out of the equation. All this allows diabetics to stick it to their diabetes by having an increase in their quality of life.